What's up, nerds? It's your boy, the OGGM, coming to you live, large and in charge from a small island off the coast of Costa Rica. It's 8:30 in the morning. It's the 21st day of February 2023, maybe? It is bright and shiny and warm here at Site B, but supposedly we're about to be hit by a polar plunge. A polar plunge. Remember when they just had normal names like Stormfront and Cold Weather? Now they've all got to sound cool, like Polar Plunge and Aerial River, Bomb Cyclones. I guess it gets better attention. Speaking of attention, we've got a list. We haven't done a list in 2023 yet, have we? I was looking for news stories to talk about today that didn't have to do with Wizards of the Coast, and I stumbled across this. This comes to us from an organization called The Gamer. We've picked up a few things from them before. They seem to be usually pretty okay. But this is a list of the 10 most famous villains in the history of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, obviously, if I say a name and you haven't heard of it, it's not that famous. So let's go down the list, see which ones we agree with, which ones we disagree with, which ones, obviously have a more wider public appeal as opposed to the ones who are very specific and, unique to like one thing. And then, whatever. So right up top, we can name these three. Xanther with the fish, Lord Soth with what looks like a shoe on his head, and our girl, Tiamat. So at number 10, we have Xanther, the hidden crime lord of Waterdeep. Is this Xanther 1 or Xanther 2 or Xanther 3, depending upon which lore you follow regarding the Beholder mastermind. So is Xanther the 10 most well-known, famous D&D villain? He's very specific and he's very obscure. He really doesn't come up that much. Skullport, I think he shows up in one video game. There's a mention of him in original Spelljammer. He shows up obviously in Xanther's Guide to Everything. But is he that famous? If I walked down the street and went, hey, do you know who Xanther is? Most people would probably say he's the guy who runs the deli, right? Yeah, I don't know if he's in the top 10. When was the last time he doesn't, or it come up with conversation that much. So, yeah, and he's not really, I'm going to destroy the world. I'm going to take over the world. I've got this epic mecha, multi-layer plot that's going to take 7 adventures to resolve. He's like, yeah, I want to be in charge of crime in Waterdeep and keep my goldfish safe. And I may or may not be the original Xanther. Halaster Blackcloak. Is Halaster a villain? He's sort of like a force of nature, and he's only really, again, regulated to one very specific place. And he doesn't, again, unless you're talking about Undermountain, he doesn't really come up in a conversation, so I'm not going to know if he's like one of the best villains. And Halaster isn't really a villain. He's more like a force of nature. He just wanders around down Underdark and, does stuff in his mega dungeon. And when you run across him, he is, he could be helpful. He could be harmful. He could be completely ignore you because he's, insane. So, yeah, I don't know if Halaster counts. Ashtralon. Ooh, I don't even know who this one is. So yeah, you're not that famous if I've never heard of you. Is he the dragon from one of the dragons from Feldhaven? Doesn't even say where he's from. He is the immortal great worm of the astral plane. He must be from a module. Yeah, you're. I don't know who you are. Kos. Oh, yeah. As in the Sword of Kos, as in the soldier that betrayed Vecna. He appears in some third-party stuff. Does he really show up that much in D&D? When was the last time he came up with a conversation, Strahd. Definitely well known. Again, villain? I mean, obviously in his mind, he's not a villain. He is mad. He is, a vampire. But again, his activities are only located in one specific area and controlling Bavaria and living out his tragic loop and just basically being super vampire goth boy. So obviously he's extremely well known and one of the most popular iconic figures of D&D villainy, but is he one of the best villains in D&D history? Other than being iconic, it's like, yeah, I love Strahd. He's such a man, he just does all these things. But again, he's very limited to one very specific series of events. So I don't know, Lord Soth. Again, limited to one very specific series of events. But if you're familiar with Lord Soth, then he's just a bad boy. He's just, the original Death Knight, fallen paladin, all that stuff with Dragonlance, kicks his way out of Dragonlance, goes to other places and, lays down the smack. But again, very limited, Lord Soth will flee after he was once. Yeah, we all know he did stuff. He was evil. He was, I mean, he's definitely a major league bad guy. He's definitely done some really evil stuff. And, he's the original fallen paladin, the original Death Knight. So, yeah, I'll give him a rub because I've always kind of liked him. So I would say, yeah, he definitely deserves to be on the list. He's done some pretty villainous stuff. Is he well known outside of the circles of, hardcore D&D fans? Maybe. I don't know. Number 4, a Saracek. Oh, actually, I think shouldn't a Saracek be higher? So a Saracek, of course, infamous for Tomb of Horrors and Tomb of Annihilation. He is the Lich's Lich. He's the guy who just goes around to be a lich for the sake of being a lich. He builds dungeons and sets up these machinations of horrible evilness like the Death Plague simply because he can. Simply because he's bored, simply because he wants to see what can happen. He builds a dungeon. He's like a salesman, which makes him, I guess, even multiple evil. He'll build a dungeon. Then the players will run, the characters will run through the dungeon and he sees what works and what he doesn't work. And what works, he copies and pastes to his next dungeon. And when it doesn't work, he kicks to the side. And then he builds another version of the Tomb of Horrors and he travels multiple planes, building these horrible dungeons and torturing people and testing them and selling them. And basically for him, it's just fun. So yeah, definitely he deserves to be on the list. Number 3, Vecna, of course. Of course, Vecna. Vecna should be number 1. I mean, is there a more well-known villain than Vecna, with the exception of maybe Tiamat? I mean, again, this is a guy who become a god. He's, Lord of Secrets. He's, hand and eye of Vecna. Critical Role. Not Critical Role. Well, he's been the major villain in several Critical Role series. He's the major villain in the Critical Role anime. He's been the major villain in Stranger Things. So yeah, number 2, Demogorgon. Other than one mention in Stranger Things, how often does Demogorgon come up? He's like the evil dude we always forget about. It's like, oh yeah, Orcus, Jubilex, and the other guy, the baboon dude, Demon Lord of Knowles. Yeah, no. Other than being mentioned in the first season of Stranger Things. And number 1, Tiamat. Well, she's probably the most well-known, recognized, just because she's been the iconic figure. And she's done a lot of, things, especially she's had multiple adventures based around her. So she's definitely in the top 3. I don't know if she's the number 1 villain in D&D. She's definitely probably her and Vecna are probably the most recognizable. But if we just look, I think, then who is where's Orcus? Where's Orcus? Where's Asmodeus? Where's some of the other big bads? Where's Zastam? Where are the guys who have actually gone out and done horrible, evil things throughout the history of D&D? And if we look at the people who've done the most horrible, evil things in the history of D&D, it's Orcus, Vecna, Tiamat. So do you agree with this list? Do you disagree with this list? Is there anybody on this list you think shouldn't be on the list? Is Tiamat the number one most popular, most famous, biggest bad in all of D&D? Maybe. She's probably in the top 5. Demogorgon, I mean, he's big, he's bad, but how often do you hear about him? So no. Vecna, I mean, yeah, Vecna should be probably number 1 or number 2. I mean, if it's a fight between Vecna and Tiamat for who's done the most horrible, evil things and is the most well-known, did Tiamat get an entire season of Stranger Things dedicated to her? No, not yet. Sarasak, yeah, kind of. Lord Soth, definitely. But again, everything, a lot of these guys are only specific to 1 or 2 things. So I don't know if they really fit as, the most evil ever and the most well-known or most famous D&D. I mean, it's probably got to be Tiamat or Vecna as the most famous D&D villains, right? Agree, disagree? Do you even care? Am I just wasting my time? You want to check the link out below? It's down below. Make up your own list. Who is your most famous D&D villain? Let me know. And while you're doing that, please like, please share, please subscribe. Please check out the link down below to Big Geek Emporium so you can support the OGGM because tax time's coming up. Till next time, see ya. Yeah, Vecna. It's got to be Vecna.